In 1400, Timbuktu held 700,000 manuscripts. Harvard hadn't been built yet. They told you Africa had no education, no civilization, no written history. They told you the continent sat in darkness, waiting for someone else to arrive and illuminate it. That is the lie they needed you to believe. Because the truth, the full, documented, undeniable truth, destroys everything they built their empire on. Timbuktu's Sankore University was training 25,000 students in astronomy, law, medicine, and mathematics while Europe was still recovering from the Black Death, while kings couldn't read their own decrees, while the average European city had no running water and no concept of a university curriculum. Before Oxford had finished its first stone hall, before the printing press had been imagined in Europe, before Christopher Columbus had been born, Africa had already built one of the greatest intellectual civilizations the world has ever known. And they buried it. They renamed it. They erased it. But it still exists. And tonight, we are bringing it back. To understand Timbuktu, you have to understand the world it was born into. The city sits at the edge of the Sahara Desert, in what is today the nation of Mali, along the Great Bend of the Niger River. It was not an accident of geography. It was a deliberate creation of commerce, culture, and ambition. Founded around the 11th century by Tuareg nomads as a seasonal camp, Timbuktu rapidly transformed into something the world had rarely seen. By the 13th century, it had become the convergence point of three of the most powerful trade routes in the ancient world, routes that connected sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa, to the Arabian Peninsula, to the Mediterranean, and ultimately to Asia and Southern Europe. Gold moved through this city. Salt moved through this city. Ivory, copper, kola nuts, enslaved people taken in war, fine cotton cloth, all of it passed through Timbuktu's markets, and all of it generated wealth on a scale that staggers the modern imagination. By the 14th century, the Mali Empire under Mansour Musa had made Timbuktu its crown jewel. When Mansour Musa of Mali, Amir of Mel, Lord of the Mines of Wangara, made his now legendary Hajj to Mecca in 1324, he traveled with a caravan of 60,000 men, 12,000 enslaved servants each carrying 4 pounds of gold dust, and 80 camels each bearing between 50 and 300 pounds of gold. He spent and gave away so much gold in Cairo that he crashed the Egyptian gold market for 12 years. 12 years. A single man's pilgrimage destabilized the economy of an entire Mediterranean civilization for over a decade. That is the weight of wealth we are talking about. That is the empire behind Timbuktu. Mansour Musa returned from his Hajj with architects, scholars, and a mission. He commissioned the great architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, a poet and designer he had brought from Andalusia, to build mosques and academic centers across the Mali Empire. The Djingareba Mosque, completed in 1327, still stands today. It was not merely a house of worship. It was the anchor of an intellectual revolution. Around it, and around the Sankore Mosque, and around Sidi Yohia, the city of Timbuktu began constructing the greatest university system in the medieval world. Sankore University, though it functioned less like a single institution and more like a network of learning centers clustered around the mosques, was enrolling students from across Africa, from Arabia, from Persia, from Andalusian Spain. At its height, 25,000 students lived and studied in Timbuktu, in a city whose total population was approximately 100,000. To put that in context, that means 1 in 4 residents of Timbuktu was a student. In 1400, the University of Paris, considered the crown of European higher learning, had roughly 3,000 students. Sankore had more than 8 times that number. And they were studying subjects that European institutions would not formally teach for another century or more. The curriculum at Sankore was breathtaking in its scope and sophistication. Students mastered the Quran, but they also studied mathematics using techniques that paralleled and in some cases preceded developments attributed to European mathematicians. They studied astronomy with enough precision to construct accurate Islamic calendars and navigate trade routes by the stars. They studied medicine, pharmacology, surgery, the treatment of eye disease, drawing from and expanding upon the work of Ibn Sina, known in Europe as Avicenna. They studied rhetoric, history, geography, ethics, and law. Islamic jurisprudence was debated at a level of complexity that rivaled anything produced in Cairo or Baghdad. And all of it, every lecture, every legal opinion, every mathematical proof, every medical observation, was written down. This is where the manuscripts become the heartbeat of the story. Scholars in Timbuktu did not simply read books. They produced them. Families collected libraries the way European nobles collected land. The most prominent scholarly families, the Keti family, the Akit family, accumulated private collections of thousands of volumes. Ahmad Baba Amasifai, born in Timbuktu in 1556 and widely considered one of the greatest scholars the city ever produced, personally owned a library of 1,600 manuscripts, and lamented that it was one of the smallest in his circle. When he was eventually captured and transported to Marrakesh in 1593 following the Moroccan invasion, his books were confiscated. He reportedly wept not for his freedom, but for his library. That is what these documents meant. They were not decorative. They were the accumulated intelligence of a civilization. By the time European explorers began their aggressive expansion into Africa in the 15th and 16th centuries, Timbuktu's total manuscript collection was estimated at between 700,000 and 1 million individual volumes. This covered